Good evening, workshoppers. Welcome to episode 117 of the Westmarch Workshop. We've got a whole bunch of new info regarding the Necromancer in store for you. I'm definitely liking this new pattern. Every week that we have a new episode of the show, we get the Necromancer back from the beta, and then the week afterwards they take it away. So we always have something new and interesting to talk about with the current patch cycle, and this episode is no different. We've got a whole load of new Necromancer items that are added in, so I hope that you like shopping, because we're going to go on a little bit of a clothes hunt here with the Necromancer's new clothes. I said clothes a lot in that one. I should probably rethink that opening, but yeah, since we're doing this live, I guess I don't really have much of an opportunity to change it at this point. But we'll just go ahead and get right into the thick of things here. As for the people that are live here on Twitch and watching this on YouTube, you could probably already go and figure it out. Unfortunately, it's going to be just a solo 9-ball show episode tonight, because Leviathan could not make it. He is having some serious computer issues. Anyone that's been going through and following his streams has probably noticed that he hasn't been able to stream in the last couple of days. He's been given some updates on Twitter, but yeah, the PC unfortunately looks like it might have, I would say it might be on its last legs, but that would infer that it actually had legs with which to stand on, which at the moment it does not. So it's just me at the moment. We will hopefully be able to go through and get Leviathan's PC problems resolved here in time for next week. It was just very poor timing this weekend and some pretty serious issues. But fear not. We still have all the latest news and coverage for everything Diablo related that you probably want to hear. And maybe some stuff that you don't, but hey, you know, what can I say? So, when I was going through and planning for tonight's episode, yesterday, I was just going through and thinking to myself, well, this probably will be a little bit of a shorter episode. We do have a lot of interesting stuff from last week's Necromancer FAQ that they went and posted on Facebook and have since went and shared on, Twitch, YouTube, and all the other favorite video websites. And while we did have a lot of really cool information that we got from it, it won't take all that much to kind of go and hit all the questions. There's a lot of kind of redundant questions that got asked a lot, and if you actually watch the live stream itself, I think every other question was, when's the release date and what's the price? The two things that they have not announced yet. So before you leave a comment down below or a comment in the chat, they've not announced the release date or the price yet. So I hope that answers the question before you even ask it. And I now expect, Longshot or Shadow to go and ask the questions in chat, just because that is how our resident trolls do. But of course, we were kind of in that FAQ, we were promised that the Necromancer patch would hit Tuesday. And then Tuesday came and went, and unfortunately there was some sort of major game-breaking bug. And that's just the nature of betas, and that's one of the reasons why they tend to pull the Necromancer completely from the beta server in order to go through and do the updates. Because there was some, some kind of really big issues that were going through with whatever the changes that they're going through and making for the Necromancer in the background. And they decided they couldn't push the patch live yet because of those problems. And so I was expecting, oh, okay, well, I've got everything under control. I'll just kind of go through the FAQ. We've got a backlog of items of the week in order to do. We got a couple community emails to go through. But then just a couple hours ago, we got hit all of a sudden with a new beta patch. The Necromancer has been added back, and there's some minor skill changes, some little bit of set tweaks, but the big one is that we finally have the non-set class-specific items. So we finally have a whole slew of items to kind of go in and fully complement and complete those builds that the Necromancer sets have kind of laid out. As we talked about in the previous episode, the Necromancer sets generally are a bit more generic. Not a bad thing, but they kind of have a wide-reaching range of buffs and abilities that leave you very open to how that you want to play with that particular set. And that it would really come down to those supplementing items on how you're going to play the build. and we didn't have any of those. So some of the builds felt incomplete, like the pet set was very aggravating to play. The corpse set, which I'm so sad, I'll get into that one in a little bit, was probably one of the most fun experiences that I've had in Diablo in quite some time, has been changed. And like I said, I'll talk about that one in a little bit. But they, there's just some little tiny things to go through and really make these sets shine, and as well as finally having some decent survivability items added in to help push the Necromancer up into the higher Greater Rifts, instead of they've been stalling out at about Greater Rift 60s, in the 60s area, with some exceptions that were making creative use of extremely overpowered passives to make themselves immune and then go up and start clearing, Greater Rift 100 pluses. But we'll just have to go through and get into, all those sweet details. Because pretty much almost everything that they talked about in the FAQ was either things that have been covered previously, or things that they hinted at that were just flat out then given to us in today's patch. I'm gonna kind of gloss over the majority of it. There are some other interesting things that they went through and talked about. Some of the more creative ones were some questions that people actually ask if, like, the Necromancer's revive skill, since it brings something back to life, wouldn't it be cool if you could actually cast it on, like, the corpse of one of your fellow players and, like, either bring them back to life or create a monster, from their corpse that you could control and, go and use? And it was something that they had actually thought about before, and it would be super cool, but it raises a lot of design questions, and so there's currently no plans on implementing it. They again reiterated all the work that's going into Revive, and how Revive still requires a lot more work before it's finally done. There's over 1,100 different monsters in the game that they had to go through and recreate new art for Revive to work. There's another interesting question about if there was any plans to go and add the Iron Golem from Diablo 2 back into Diablo 3, and they said it would have been just too big of a challenge to go through and actually do it justice, and it might have done a weird interaction with how players would respond to the skill and how you'd have to sacrifice items to it. It just didn't really feel like a good fit in the system. And for those that might have not played Diablo 2, the Iron Golem was a special golem for the Necromancer, in that you actually would cast the spell on an item, and the golem would get some of its properties. So if you casted it on a weapon that gave, say, 200% weapon damage, the golem would get 200% increased damage. Or if it was an item that had thorns, the golem itself already had thorns to start with, but would get increased, reflect damage capabilities. Or if you used it on an ethereal weapon, that ethereal property, I believe that was either, it was 50% or 100% base damage or defense of the item, would then correlate that property onto the golem. And so it was just an interesting way that you could mix and match the Iron Golem with items. It sounds a lot cooler than it actually was. It was not a very useful skill in any way, shape, or form, but it was kind of fun to go through and kind of experiment with a little bit, or even just to troll somebody by going through and they drop an item on the ground, and before they can pick it back up, you turn it into an Iron Golem. So yeah, that was just some of the more interesting things that they had. I guess there was some other development stuff, they purposely did not really think about the overall meta or support build for the Necromancer when creating a class. All the classes are going to have a couple of support skills or support passives, whether they end up being powerful enough in order to earn a spot in that highly coveted 4-man meta or not. Nor were they thinking about the Necromancer's actual damage or group damage in those terms either, to ensure that it was going to earn a spot there. Their main concern right now is just that the class plays well and is fun. number tuning is still to come. So all the damage numbers that we see, even in today's patch, with all the new items that were added in, are merely still very much so in the beginning. Lots of changes that are still going to be coming underway under the length of the beta. As Steven and I were talking in prior episodes, we kind of expect that the beta itself to last all the way through the end of June, with kind of early July being when Season 11 and Patch 2.6 alongside the Necromancer will drop. So there's a lot of time. There's still 2 months worth of testing for us to go through and do. So yeah, don't take everything that you see with the Necromancer or any feedback or complaints that you might go around with the way that it is tuned currently. Just take that with a grain of salt, because it's all subject to change. It's all going to be tweaked, and I could fully expect the Necromancer to be removed from the beta as to take it down to do other changes. And so just keep an eye out and kind of reserve opinion on the Necromancer until we get closer and closer to release. Once we start getting into June, some of those numbers and like little set quirks or off-class or off-piece items are going to be a bit more concrete. Until then, everything is mutable. Everything is subject to change. And well, I guess I kind of glossed over my week in gaming as I was just trying to go through and get like straight into the big stuff. I guess I'll probably just take a quick step back and kind of fill you in on my week of gaming before we get too ahead of myself there. But let's see. Since our last episode, we only had a little bit of the Necromancer beta to play, because after last Wednesday it was taken back down a week later. This past week there's been no Necromancer, so I played a little bit of the Necro, was experimenting with some pet builds. I had a lot of fun with the Plague set that I had mentioned in the intro, that had a very interesting interaction with the Land of the Dead skill. The 2-piece set bonus made it so that way it fired off a corpse lance. And I know after we had recorded last week's episode that the Plague set was the one that Steven and I were both very critical of. Like we didn't like it. It didn't seem to have a lot of things going for it. It seemed like mechanically it might be wonky to play. But once I actually got in there and started to try it out, it was amazingly fun. But did not play anywhere like what we thought that it would. Barely ever used Bone Spear at all, even though that was supposed to be like the center point of the set. It all came down to Corpse Lance. That skill that we spent half of last episode deriding and saying how crap of a skill it was, that set made it awesome, because the 2-piece set bonus made it so that way anytime that you consumed a corpse, it shot off a corpse lance, and you could actually go and spam an ability like Devour to just consume a huge amount of corpses, and then combine that with Land of the Dead, so that way you had 10 seconds of infinite corpses to just spawn hundreds, if not potentially thousands of corpse lances to kill everything on the screen. The visual effect was just amazing. It of course was kind of laggy. I believe Riker went through and put out a video showing it in use, and it was it was a sight to behold. And I've not had a chance to play it on the beta yet today with the new changes, but it seems that it no longer fires a corpse lance, so you won't have that same skill interaction, because what made it so great was the passive Blood is Power that made it so that way every time that you lost 5% of your health, it reduced your cooldowns by 1%. Tied with the Corpse Lance rune, that every time that it fired, it cost 10% of your health, or 5% of your health, and fired an additional shot that did reduce damage. When you're spamming hundreds and hundreds of corpse lances, you go through your health total multiple times in that brief 10-second period that Land of the Dead is up. So much so that you completely reset the cooldown, the 2-minute cooldown on Land of the Dead. So you have infinite corpses infinitely as long as there are mobs there to go through and shoot, tied with the cannibalism rune that then heals you for 3% of your health for each corpse that you consume. Pretty much mitigates a lot of the health cost for those corpse runes. Throw in Rathma's Shield, you're now immune for 4 out of every 10 seconds. In some builds that people were going through and pushing and getting ridiculous, they actually were managing to stay immune 100% of the time because the cooldown interaction with Rathma's Shield and like Bone Armor and some other skills were just broken enough that it was like you're immune 24/7. That's it. You're good. Go take whatever it is that you want to do. Nothing can kill you. I hope you have the damage to go through and complete it. But it was pretty crazy, and a lot of those have changed. I'll talk about that in a little bit. But that plague set was ridiculous. But sadly, it seems, is no more. Well, at least not in the way that we were all playing it, which of course completely threw Bone Spear out the window, which was supposed to be the centerpiece of the set, and it was just kind of like, well, nah, Bone Spear sucks. I'm just using Corpse Lance. It was more so we were using Devour to trigger Corpse Lance. Corpse Lance was just on your skill bar to get the rune effect. And so I had some fun with that. And after the Necromancer was taken away, I spent this last week going and streaming a little bit and continuing to progress through Season 10. My Demon Hunter is now really geared out. I'm actually starting to gear a Witch Doctor, so that way I can go and do a couple of the conquests for the set dungeons and the Greater Rift 55 set clears, just so that way I can go and finish off Conqueror and Guardian and kind of like be done for the season. I did hit a new milestone. My previous highest Paragon level that I've ever accomplished in a season was Paragon 754. I'm now Paragon, I believe it was 787 as of last night. So I'm closing in on Paragon 800. I was hoping that if the Necromancer patch didn't come out today, that I would hop back on and hit Paragon 800. But it looks like that will have to come for another day, because tonight it's just going to be more playing of the Necromancer. It's just going to be way too much fun. I can't wait to go back in there and start playing it again. It is such a fun class to play. But yeah, that pretty much wraps up my week in gaming. Unfortunately, Leviathan is going to have to go through and fill us in on next episode, and he has plenty to talk about. Though I guess spoilers. He's like, I don't know if he still is, but like rank 1 Demon Hunter, and a whole bunch of like really high 4-player clears that he's been doing. So it's a lot of really interesting competitive stuff that Leviathan will have to go through and talk about on the next episode of Westmarch Workshop. But until then, I guess we'll just have to go through and start talking about some of these Necromancer changes. And there are some little tiny changes that they've done. They've tweaked some of the Bone Armor runes, such as the Immunity rune. Was not triggering the cooldown of Bone Armor until normally... Sorry, let me start over. Normally, any skill that has some sort of very powerful effect, such as granting you complete immunity, will not begin its cooldown until after the effect itself ends. This was not the case for Bone Armor, where the cooldown was starting when the skill was activated. So you have your 5 seconds of immunity, and then the 45-second cooldown. They both start at the same time. That's now is no longer the case. They've made it work like all the other very like powerful skills or immunity skills that are out there. And so its 45-second cooldown will not trigger until after the 5-second duration has ended. And then like one of the other big ones is of course Blood is Power. Has been completely redesigned. Now, the way that it used to work is that every time that you lost a certain percentage of health, all of your cooldowns reduced. And so this was something that could be exploited by basically cycle through your entire health bar like twice, and then all of your cooldowns are over. And people were using this to have no cooldowns on any of their skills, and was just not conducive to good gameplay. It now still has the same essence, in that after you lose after cumulatively losing 100% of your maximum life, all ability cooldowns are reduced by 20%. This effect cannot reduce an ability's cooldown more than once each time that the ability is used. So it can still be useful for some of your longer term skills, or even shorter term skills if you're using something like the blood set or a lot of blood runes, so that way you are actually cycling through your complete health pool multiple times in like a short period. But now is a bit more balanced, that it will only ever reduce the skill's cooldown by 20% each time that you use the skill. So you have, Land of the Dead, 2-minute cooldown. If you manage to lose 100% of your life in that 2-minute period, it's going to have, 20% of the cooldown axed off immediately. But it can only trigger that one time. So no more using it to constantly go through and cycle Land of the Dead. Or any other, big skills. So that's definitely something. I talked about this, on my stream a couple of times, that the skill itself, Blood is Power, was just flat out broken and needed to be changed. It was, what was it? It was critical mass all over again. The old wizard passive that was removed with Reaper. It was too powerful compared to anything else, and just led to exploitive gameplay, and you end up in scenarios that just aren't good or cohesive for a game, such as keeping mobs CC'd permanently, or keeping a Necromancer invulnerable 100% of the time. It's not engaging gameplay. At that point, I don't need vitality on or any type of resist on a single piece of gear. I'm going full damage and full immunity, and I can kill everything, and I don't actually worry about my health total. I don't have to make any decisions about placement, engaging certain types of mobs. It takes all the decision making out of the game completely. And I'm happy to see that change. It will bring a bit more balance. There are, of course, some other passives I think that might need to be addressed, more buffs than nerfs. I think Blood is Power is the only outlier. And now that that one is kind of been taken care of, we can focus on some more of the other passives and see what other ones could be tweaked. But going through, the Bone Armor had some runes that they changed the damage type of the, instead of just being always physical, some of them are now cold or poison. The Command Skeletons has been reworked slightly. Its active ability used to give a short temporary buff that increased the damage of your skeletons for a short period of time and focus them to attack one target. It's now been changed. It no longer has a duration. The skeletons will continue to have their damage buffed until they kill the target that you've told them to attack, or until you give them another target to attack. This addressed one of my bigger issues with that particular skill. The way that the pet set has been created, it focuses around Skeletal Mage. So almost all of your essence is being dumped into Skeletal Mage. Attempting to use Command Skeletons felt wonky because it felt like I wasn't casting other Skeletal Mage and getting myself my damage buff. But the Command Skeletons themselves could offer some pretty decent single target damage. Now it is a bit more of a fire and forget. Something like a Rift Guardian or a particularly nasty elite, you can sick them on it and they'll retain that damage buff and only attack that target until that target is dead or a bigger threat comes around. And so it's going to be amazing, especially when we get into some of the actual class items, that I think this singular change with the new items is really big and is going to actually make Command Skeletons something you want to use instead of just having it on your bar because, well, I'm the pet build, I should have more pets, right? This will be really cool. There's been a slight change to the Necromancer cheat death. We were talking previously in some past episodes how we weren't very happy with it because you had to have pets for it to work. It didn't have an immunity. Then they added an immunity to it, but it still felt a little bit limiting because you had to have pets for it to actually heal you. Now it does say that it does not require active pets to prevent your death or to grant the immunity. And it also now, on the other side of it that we were talking about that we didn't like, how it leaves you in a precarious situation because your cheat death passive just procced, but it also consumed all of your pets. And so now you're without the defensive, kind of shield that pets might offer. Or if you're playing like a pet build, you're damaged because all of your pets now just disappeared, and that's where all of your damage comes from. It now won't consume all of the pets immediately. It will now pretty much consume like pets like one at a time until you're at 100% health. I'm sure there's going to be some algorithms in the background that will dictate how the pets are consumed. Probably would start with, like the golem, command skeletons, and then I would hope the way that the pet set works, that it's all built around the skeletal mages, that it would then begin to consume revives before it consumed skeletal mages as like a last-ditch effort in order to go through and do it. But definitely a welcome change, Still a little bit weaker if you're not using pets because you won't get any heal out of it at all. But we'll have to wait and see. There was, I guess the one other change is that the wizard skill for a mirror image, that had a rune called Simulacrum, and to avoid any conflict of when people are talking about Simulacrum, because that's a core skill for the Necromancers now, the rune has just been changed to Hard Light. Now for the interesting stuff. We've got a whole slew of new class items that went through and got added in. If you are playing in the beta, if you haven't checked out Dank Memes in a while, he now is selling kind of like little gift packs that will contain collections of these new class-specific items, so that way you can use your blood shards specifically to get these items, in addition to get the class sets. So you can really focus farm, get the items that you need, re-roll them, get good rolls, so you can actually like get a complete set a lot sooner, and then get up there climbing in the greater rifts and climbing and testing their damage. So going into these, we've got some of the items first I'd like to go through. Some of these, I'm not sure whether it's going to be like a weapon, an offhand, a chest piece. They didn't list it in the patch notes, and I haven't had too much of a time to get onto the beta to actually go through and catalog everything. Like I mentioned, it just went live a couple hours ago. But we'll go through this, and I will do my best. So we've got the Funerary Pick. Siphon Blood now drains blood from 2 additional targets. So it's now... Siphon Blood was one of the more damaging of the basic generator skills, but it was single target in a channeled skill. This now allows it to damage 3 enemies at once. And there are some other items that will work with Siphon Blood. We'll have to see once people actually test it out whether it will be useful. I'm not sure if this will make a generator, which already is a bit lower on the damage spectrum compared to the spenders, combined with some of your other skills, and whether it will be useful or not, we'll just have to wait and see. Trangol's Corroded Fang. The Cursed Scythe rune for Grim Scythe now has a 100% chance to apply a curse. So instead of, this was the Cursed Scythe made it so that way every time that you use Grim Scythe, it had a chance to put a random rune on the enemy's hit. This weapon will now make it so that way every time that you hit an enemy of Grim Scythe, it will have a random curse applied to it. And that is possible to stack all 3 curses up on the mobs at once using just Grim Scythe. You won't gain the advantage of any of the runes from those skills unless you have it on your bar. When skills like this, it will only apply the base curse. So you'll only apply the base leech, which is the 1% health every time that you attack the target, the base decrepify, which is the attack speed and movement speed decrease, and the base frailty, which causes the mob to die at 15% health as opposed to 0. And that's actually one other thing that I wanted to address. I feel validated, vindicated in this, because on the FAQ they did go through and mention specifically people were asking about the frailty, the curse of frailty, and Travis Day went through and said that, yeah, the curse of frailty, a mob dying at 15% health, is just a fancy roundabout way of saying that the mob takes increased damage. You know, it is a really good damage buff because of how it stacks with all the other pre-existing damage buffs. But that, at the end of the day, that's all that it is. It's just a damage increase. That doesn't inflate your numbers, but it still causes the mob to just die sooner. So, I was right. I'm taking a moment. Leviathan, you know, he is not here right now for me to go through and gloat, but I am vindicated. So, Steve, when you watch this on the replay, I was right. That's all I'm saying. All I'm saying. I'm taking a moment on that one. Back to the items, and no less bragging. So yeah, Trengle's Corroded Fang. That'll be interesting, especially because there are some items that also interact with curses, and so it's going to kind of create some interesting gameplay effects once you start adding all these things together. Scythe of the Cycle. Your secondary skills deal 250 to 300% additional damage while bone armor is active, but reduce the remaining duration of bone armor by 3 seconds. I haven't had a chance to test out this one, but it definitely sounds really interesting. Namely, the bone armor set, the Saint set, which is now, I believe, called the Grace of Inarius set, made it so that way you always have bone armor up, give you a lot of big bonuses for bone armor, and increases the amount of damage that you do while bone armor is active, and then also increases the damage that mobs take while they're kind of like within a melee range around you. I was playing around with this one as kind of like just a generator thorns build and having a lot of fun with it. This will make it so that way you actually want to use some of the secondary skills, skeletal mage and other abilities, bone spear. You know, just giving it more of a oomph, more of a damage increase. And I think that this would be an interesting way of doing it. It does sound like it will now, every time, I want to say that the wording on this is every time you use a secondary skill, the duration of bone armor will then be reduced by 3 seconds. It normally lasts a minute, so you have a lot of leeway, and bone armor with that set just refreshes its stacks every time that you use it. So you only need to kind of clip one mob at a time to keep your full stacks of bone armor. So that'll be interesting gameplay. You know, you go through, you use a whole bunch of spinders, do a whole bunch of extra damage, but I gotta make sure that I use the skill to keep it up because I only have a couple seconds left because I went a little bit too far with it. Next item, Dread Golem Spike. Bone Spear now costs 40 essence, so it doubles its essence cost, but also deals 125 to 150% additional damage. This is one that I'm happy to see, especially because the Plague set, which is supposed to be all about Bone Spear, the way that it works is that you consume corpses, it gives you a stack, gives you stacks of this buff that increases the damage of Bone Spear by 1,000%. Which is not a lot. I thought that hopefully it would consume all the stacks every time that you used it, but it only consumes one at a time. So it's only giving an extra 1,000% damage to Bone Spear, which is not a lot. Combined with this now, we should start getting into the territory where you're going to see that Bone Spear actually doing a significant amount of damage. Still have to go through and test it and see whether it's, you know, how multiplicative that this change is. And also, 40 essence, that's the cost of Skeletal Mage, and that's, Bone Spear normally costing the 20 and now costing 40. That change, we went from having, a trivial cost to now it's something that has a bit more of a significant cost. So it'll create a little bit more interaction, you have to put a little bit more thought into it. But, you know, with, if you use just Devour to trigger all of your corpse consumptions, you might not really have much of a problem with your essence generation with that build. Next, Bloodtide Blade. Death Nova deals 125 to 150% increased damage for every enemy within 10 yards. So here is your AoE clear spell, because now this one, the more mobs you get stacked up around you, the more damage it does. That item right there could be one of those things that pushes the Necromancer into the group meta, just because that is going to be an insane amount of AoE damage if you have a ton of enemies stacked up. I imagine this will get a cap, so that way its damage isn't going to skyrocket to insane levels. If it doesn't already have a cap, that just isn't mentioned in the patch notes, because that's crazy. That's absolutely crazy. Just like we saw with Faithful Memory in the Hammerden, that when we were in the Season 9 testing, there was a lot of iterations on that particular item, and eventually they said, well, the only way to balance it is to give it a cap. And so I'm sure this one will get a cap as well. But that is going to be a shit ton of damage, especially the way that it could interact with other sets, like the aforementioned Inarius' Grace set, just because it gives that set gives you bonus damage on everything within melee range of you, and this is, a Nova centered on you. So we're already starting to get some of these interactions, which take, like when you have, you deal, Bone Armor's active, or you deal 850% weapon bonus damage to everything within melee round or range around you, 850% extra percent. That's not a lot. This, say you have 10 mobs, that could be an extra 1500% damage on top of that 850. Now we're starting to get somewhere. Now we actually are starting to get some interesting damage figures on that one. Relina's Shadow Hook. Bone Spike generates an additional 2 to 4 essence per each enemy hit. I was liking to use Bone Spike as my generator in any range build. I think Grim Scythe is without a doubt the best generator for something if you're going to be up in melee, but for more of like the pet set, or the plague set, where you want a little bit more range because you don't have quite the same survivability as you do in the bone armor set, this is going to be a lot nicer, just because you can hit multiple enemies and start really generating a lot of essence. This will help a lot with keeping your essence up for like those really heavy resource cost intensive skills like the pet set and having to spam skeletal mages. Next item, Death Scythe. Each different poison skill you use increases the damage of your other poison skills by 75 to 100% for 15 seconds. Now, this is opening up some opportunities, so that way you can go and use like multiple poison skills. And this one is, I guess, a bit like Tal Rasha's, where you cycle through like the different elements. So this one is not different elements, but just different poison skills. I wonder how it will work with some skills that don't do damage, such as Decay Golem. That, is it, if I just use it, will it still give me the buff? And that'll be kind of interesting, and like just how the different stacks will interact with one another. Am I kind of like going across like the keyboard every 15 seconds to make sure that I have like a full, I don't know, 6 stacks of that buff up, to make sure that I'm doing like a huge amount of increased poison damage. And that just goes back, like, so all these sets, all these items that we've gone over so far are very like mutable. There's things that could be used in all of like these pre-existing sets, except like that item in like the blood set, since all the blood skills are poison, or not poison, physical. You won't get any poison skills out of there. But they're really interesting, that they're kind of designed to be a bit more general, in that you can kind of like mix and match items to sets as you see fit. And as the theory crafters get in there and start digging and start messing around with these different skills, I'm sure over the next week we'll get some more coherent builds, just so that way you get like really cool like just kind of like item interactions that, just looking at it right now, that no one's ever thought of. This next item is one that I was really interested in, because I was talking about I was having fun playing that bone set with thorns. The Spear of Jesseth. Your thorns is increased by 10 to 15% for every enemy afflicted by one of your curses. And now, since this is like a melee-oriented set, you're going through and getting into the thick of things, that you have the Aura of Frailty. And so that way, all the enemies in melee range of you that are then taking the increased damage from the set will now also be further increasing your Thorns damage. I was talking previously how like a Thorns build might not work so much for the Necromancer because they don't have a passive to like double the amount of Thorns damage that they can do. But this one could, depending upon whether they end up adding a cap to it or not, could be really crazy. Could push kind of like another kind of like Thorns build up there for the Necromancer. Then we have Lost Time. Your cold skills reduce the movement speed of enemies by 30%. In addition, your movement speed is increased by 4 to 5% for 5 seconds with a max of 5 stacks. I'm not sure if this is part of the like the two-piece Necromancer set that was added in, because they did say that they were going to be adding in kind of like that two-piece set to help out with kind of like speed farming. But this one could be interesting maybe for like a speed farming build, just because using cold skills will increase your movement speed, just being able to go through and run around faster. Bone Ringer. The damage bonus of command skeletons is increased by 25 to 30% each second while active. This one, I can't wait to see how it actually works, because if the way that it's worded makes it seem as if the damage bonus of the command skeletons is increased for every second that remains active, with the change that the active ability will continue to stay until the mob that is targeted dies. Means if you put this on a Rift Guardian, you know, after, you know, like 10-15 seconds, it's each one of those skeletons is doing a ridiculous amount of damage. Combine that with then the Frenzy Rune, which increases their attack speed, you know, throw in some Taskers, and you're gonna have like some crazy single target damage potential for this build. And so we've got some really, just looking at these things and not even knowing how they play yet, they are already kind of like targeting some of those niche. I'm not sure. I'm probably pronouncing it wrong either way. But you know, like you have the one build with Death Nova that's really focused on AoE clearing, and then you've got like this here for your single target clears with the command skeletons. It's really cool that they are going through and they found all these different like play styles, and they're trying to address all of them. And of course, the whether it's OP or not remains to be seen, and all these damage values, of course, will be open to change. So the functionality of the items or the skills, of course, might be open to change. We'll have to just wait and see. Ledger's Disdain. Grim Scythe deals an additional 7 to 10% damage for each point of essence that it restores. This is one of those ones where it's like, if you're... I do wonder if it is actual essence that is generated, or the potential essence that it could generate, because Grim Scythe generates essence per mob hit. And so you can, if you have decent density, you can actually go from 0 to 200 on your essence with the single use of Grim Scythe. And so that could pop for a crap ton of damage. But then I also wonder, if you're at full essence, will it give you the damage increase when you hit a bunch of mobs? So that pushes that one up there for giving a huge amount of damage boost on Grim Scythe, combined with, you know, Depth Diggers and some other ones. You could have a potent single or a generator build for the Necro. The Iron Rose, attacking with Blood Siphon while at full health, has a 15 to 25% chance to cast a free Blood Nova. And as I mentioned before, you had that item that makes it so that way Siphon Blood now targets 3 enemies at once. I imagine each one of those will have an individual chance to go through and pop those Blood Novas, which then makes me wonder, how does that also work with the other item that increases the damage of those Blood Novas, or those, you know, the Death Nova. Blood Nova is a rune of Death Nova. As you're going through and using that with, say, like the Blood set, you could just be sitting there with Siphon Blood, channeling that, having the Blood Novas proc, giving you stacks of the bonus with the Blood set, so that way even though the health costs increase, so does its damage, which then increases the damage by hitting all of the mobs. And then you don't even have to be in the thick of things. You could actually be sitting back well away from all of the enemies and AoEing things down. We'll have to wait and see how that skill interaction is. The Johnstone. Each corpse consumed in Land of the Dead increases your damage by 10% for 8 to 10 seconds after it ends. I really, really love the Land of the Dead skill. I wish that there was some set that was more focused on it or helping me reduce the cooldown even more. But that could be a huge damage increase if it does not have a cap. Because being able to, like, just the 10 seconds that Land of the Dead lasts, Devour consuming, I believe Devour consumes 10 corpses every time you use the skill, and has a very, very short cast time. And you can spam the heck out of Devour and have a huge damage bonus if that doesn't have a cap. Unless they change how Devour works with Land of the Dead. But that has a lot of potential. I could see that being a very powerful item with the Plague set, just because it's all about consuming corpses, and with that set, that Land of the Dead becomes a really huge DPS cooldown, even though it kind of already was. Haunted Visions. Simulacrum now drains 10 to 15% of your maximum health every second, but lasts twice as long. So that way you can get Simulacrum to last for 30 seconds, or 20 seconds if you're using the Bone Rune. But now every second that you have it up, you're losing 10 to 15% of your health. So that turns it into a huge damage increase. Makes it a bit easier to play around with some cooldown reduction in order to have an overall uptime on it, but makes it very tricky because you're always taking damage then at that point. So you're going to have some form of self-heal or a lot of life on hit, or just some other way of making sure that you get your health back. So that's really, really sacrificing a lot of health just to have that increased uptime on this damage boost. Wisdom of Kalen increases the maximum number of bone armor stacks by 5. That's huge for the bone armor set, which gives you the damage reduction per stack of bone armor. Bone armor itself already gives you a damage reduction per stack. If you're not using the Inarius set, it caps out at 30%. With this one, it will cap out at 45%. With the Inarius set, without this item, it will be 50% damage reduction. With it, you'll have 75% damage reduction. So that's a huge survivability boost through that item, depending upon what skill or sets that you're using. Bloodsong Mail. While in Land of the Dead, Command Skeletons gains the effect of all runes and deals 100 to 125% increased damage. They're really making Command Skeletons a skill you want to use. Because in the pet set, they were just kind of there because they got a passive damage bonus, but your star player was Skeletal Mage. The pet set doesn't really have any way of drastically reducing the cooldown of Land of the Dead. We'll have to wait and see if this is going to be worth using in that particular build. It is a nice damage increase, especially if you've put all of your skeletons on the Rift Guardian with that other item that increases the amount of damage that they do as the duration continues, and then as they're starting to get a decent level, bam, just hit Land of the Dead, and then double dip on all that damage that you're getting. Could be effective if it's worth having Land of the Dead. It's really hard right now finding builds for the Necromancer, or defining them, because you always have it's not even 7 skills you want to use, it's 10 skills that you want to use at once. Requiem Seraplate. When Devourer restores essence or life above your maximum, the essence is granted over 3 seconds, or the excess is granted over 3 seconds. When using Devour, it does have a habit of just overcapping you whenever you're going through and using the skill. This will help with that, because if you overcap by a lot, you can then spend some of it, and then while you're casting your spenders, you're still regaining that essence. That is going to be huge, particularly for something like the pet set, because you kind of fill up all of your essence and then you just deplete all of it in one go, and then you have to go through and try and build it all back up. With the Devour, this will help alleviate that, because you'll gain all that you overcapped, which, because you're sitting there spamming it, you might have accumulated a stockpile of corpses. You hit Devour, and then all of a sudden you would have gained 300 essence, but you're capped at 200. You now get that extra 100 essence back over those 3 seconds. That will help with kind of like the essence generation in your resource curve. Mark of Scarlet Death. Revive consumes all corpses to raise a single minion that does an additional 125 to 150% damage per corpse. Makes it so that way you're just going to summon now this huge amalgamation of corpses for an insane amount of damage. The one thing they did mention in the FAQ with this skill, you can still have 10 of these mobs up at once. The trick will of course be trying to get like the 10 mobs, the 10 corpses together to use the revive to get the most out of each one of those uses. But this goes back in Land of the Dead. Every time that you use revive while Land of the Dead is active, it triggers at maximum. It triggers 10 corpses. So every time that you use this while Land of the Dead is active, you can easily spawn out 10 of these monstrosities for just insane amounts of damage. That's going to be a lot of fun for the pet build. Fate's Vow. After consuming 15 to 20 corpses, you unleash a free Death Nova. That one is just kind of like, I guess, free damage. We'll have to see how that one interacts. It's like it doesn't work so well with the Plague set, because you don't have a lot of items that would increase that damage without, of course, then also going and using the one weapon that increases the Death Nova damage for all of the enemies that you hit, but you might be focused a bit more on using those slots for upping your Bone Spear. We just have to kind of wait and figure out where all of these items sit. Like, are they all weapons? Are they all gauntlets? Where are they going to sit on my character? Where are they going to sit in the cube, to know which ones I can use to interact and get use out of. Moribund's Gauntlets. Your golem has a 10 to 15% chance to shed a corpse when it is hit by an enemy. That'll be nice. You can always use extra corpses around. Grasps of Essence. When an exploded corpse damages at least one enemy, your corpse explosion deals 75 to 100% extra damage for 6 seconds, stacking up to 5 times. When you use Corpse Explosion, it can trigger multiple corpses at once. And I want to say that the way that it's worded, you could probably get that full 5 stacks every time that you use Corpse Explosion, as long as you have the 5 or more corpses within range of that an enemy to be hit. So it should be relatively easy to keep that 500% increased damage buff up most of the time as you're going around and playing with Corpse Explosion. I'm not sure if those damage numbers will be high enough with like the Plague set to make it worthwhile, but everything is in flux. They'll tweak and tune the numbers as they see fit. Golem Skin Breaches. Your golem's damage is increased by 100 to 125%, and you take 25% less damage while you are within 18 yards of it. That's going to be a nice kind of like damage decrease item that you can wear, and this one is pants. So it's a different slot for going through and having the damage reduction, so you can kind of have a whole bunch of different items to give you that increased damage reduction. It increases the golem's damage, but that's not really a lot. The golem's damage is negligible at best. The bone golem is the only one that has like any type of like AoE potential, but it's on a cooldown, and even increasing that by 100% might not be a lot. Even in like say the pet set, it'd be something just that I see this one more being used for the damage reduction than increasing your golem's damage. It's like the golem does, do relatively decent damage, but it's single target. It's not going to help you clear a rift, and then his damage compared to the health of a Rift Guardian, he's not really going to be, his damage isn't going to be all that much noticeable in those situations. If they added something in that allowed the golem to cleave mobs, that item would be a lot different. Until then, we wait and see. Defiler's Cusses? Cusses? Cuses? Your guess is as good as mine. Your guess is probably better than mine. Your Bone Spirit's damage is increased by 75 to 100% for every second while it's active. Bone Spirit does a lot of damage, and it's a relatively slow-moving spell. So if there is distance between you and the mob that you're casting it at, it has the potential of racking up a pretty huge multiplier from this item. Next, this one, I do wonder, I have to ask, I don't know if Dainty or anyone else is in the stream right now, but I have to ask on this next item. Is this a reference to Leviathan? Because it's Stewart's Greaves. You gain 40 to 50% increased movement speed for 2 seconds after using Blood Rush. Now, one, because it's Stewart, which could be a reference to Leviathan. It's also a movement speed increase, which could also be a reference to Leviathan and, his marathon running and such. And it's also Blood Rush, which is Leviathan's favorite skill. So I have to ask, did Leviathan just get an item? Because that would be freaking awesome if that is true. Or if it's just like a coincidence, But, like, that'd just be really weird. Anyways. It's gonna be a reference to Leviathan in my heart. No matter what anyone says, so there. Briner's Journey. Bone Spikes has a 10 to 15% chance to cast a Bone Nova at the target location. And then another skill that then has a chance to go and use, a different Nova rune at a location for going through and using it. That's so interesting interactions. We have some stuff with, Andariel's Visage and other things like that that have that ability to trigger some sort of skill, and they don't really see a lot of use, but maybe someone will find an interaction that will work well with it. And while we're talking about references, Dainty's Binding. Decrepify gains an additional 20 to 30% damage reduction for attacks against you. That is, of course, another item that will go through and give you some damage reduction, which was one of the biggest complaints for the Necromancer in the previous stages of the beta, is just sometimes the damage might feel like it far outpaced your survivability, and then you had issues actually pushing into higher greater rifts despite your damage just because you felt so squishy. And so they've added in a lot of these damage reduction items. And of course, this is a reference to everybody's favorite Death Maiden, Nevelistis, also known as Dainty. And this is one that I did see on the beta before going through and doing the show, and I just want to read the flavor text on it. Once worn by a steadfast soul with a taste for victory, which is a very lovely descriptor for everyone's favorite Diablo community manager there. Next going on, Razith's Volition, Razith's Volition, not Violation. Skeletal Mage gains the effect of the Gift of Death rune, so this will just be another way to make sure that you have some corpse generation going. Circle of Nelush. You now raise an additional Skeletal Mage with each cast, and they will last for an additional 2 to 4 seconds. This addresses one of the biggest issues with the pet set, which is that it was just so hard to maintain more than 6 Skeletal Mages at once because of the resource cost in the overall duration of the mages. This helps to address both. It now effectively halves the resource cost of Skeletal Mage because you get 2 for 1. In addition, it gives you an extra 2 to 4 seconds on their duration. Put that in with the Extended Servitude, and now you should generally have all of your skeletons lasting for around like 12 seconds. I don't know if Extended Servitude will stack with this item and give you additional 25% on that one, so you might get another second out of it. Or if you're using the Blood Rune life support, I believe that will then now push it up to 14 or 15 seconds. So you actually be getting a decent length out of these skeletal mages, and it should feel like you're less starved for essence and that you're just playing catch-up the entire time. Prayer of Briggs. Uncursed enemies are pulled to the target location when a curse is applied to them. So this is giving Necromancers a pull. It does have a little bit more of a limited use. It's not going to be anywhere near as effective as, say, Cyclone Strike, but it does give you the ability to draw enemies into a more centralized location when you apply a curse to them. As long as they weren't cursed beforehand, it will pull them all to that location. But unfortunately, after that, you don't really have any way of continuing to keep them grouped up because your curse lasts a while, and they'll have the ability to then just freely run away, and you can't re-trigger that ability until the curse duration expires. So, a little bit of extra utility there. Might need to go a little bit further to actually find its way into like more of a curse or support based build. Crisbin's Sentence. Bone Spikes, Bone Spear, and Bone Spirit deal 125 to 150% increased damage against enemies that are stunned, frozen, charmed, feared, or blinded. Necromancer doesn't have as many ways to trigger a lot of those effects, or at least not keeping it up for extended periods of time due to cooldowns of skills and CC reduction. But that combined in, say, a group meta where you might more readily have that available will be big, especially for the Plague set, since that's focused a lot around Bone Spear, and depending upon its interaction with Bone Spirit in the previous item that increased its damage for every second that it took to get to the target. Lornell's Sunstone. Your damage reduction is increased by 0.75 to 0.95% for every 1% of life you are missing. This one is big, especially for the Blood set, since the Blood set will rarely be at max life for very long. As you're going and continuing to consume your life powering your skills, as your life drops, so does your damage reduction. So it makes it so that way, you know, you still don't want to take a lot of damage when you're low at health, but this will give you a lot of damage reduction based on that. It could also be used in non-blood builds, just if you're at a point where you're having some survivability issues and are taking a lot of damage. This will help, and so that way it will kind of like smooth out your damage intake, because the lower life you are, the less damage you'll be taking. And rounding it out now, we have the Corpse Whisperer Pauldrons. A Corpse Lance damage is increased by 15 to 20% for 3 seconds for each time you consume a corpse. Max 15. The patch notes say max 15, 80 stacks. The item itself maxes at 15 stacks, and that didn't seem to be changeable. That one could help make Corpse Lance a bit more useful. They have taken Corpse Lance off of the Plague set. The 2-piece set bonus now fires a Corpse Shard instead of actually casting a Corpse Lance. So it isn't as big there. I think that like with that item combined with the ability that every time you consumed a corpse to can't cast Corpse Lance, might be giving it a bit more utility. But that is one I think, you know, Corpse Lance was meh, and then because of the Plague set, it's like, this is freaking awesome, and then now they changed the Plague set, and now it's back to meh. You know, it's single target skill, doesn't do as much damage as it probably should. Well, I'll withhold complete judgment until we actually get in there and start using it. Now we're going through and getting into some of the little changes that they made to the class sets. The pet set, which has now been renamed Bones of Rathma. The 4-piece set bonus used to last for 3 seconds. Now lasts for 5. A little bit extra time on it. Still is a short duration and slightest bit of downtime in between mob density while running a rift means that you are now very vulnerable because you just lost a huge chunk of damage reduction. I would feel more comfortable if it was 10 seconds, just so that way I'd have to be really screwed on mob density for it to drop off. That one, of course, will still require some tuning. The Blood set, now officially renamed as Trengol's Avatar. The 6-piece set bonus has been a little bit better defined. Every time that you spend 10% of your life, it grants you a stack of Blood Cascade, which now stacks up to 50 times. And then, as before, each stack increases your damage by 200%, but also increases the life cost by an additional 10%. Using a skill to heal yourself will cause the skill to heal you for an additional 300%, but will consume a stack of the buff. They've changed it so that way healing from skills will now consume will only consume 1 stack regardless of how many targets are hit. If you were using, say, Cannibalize for the Devour room, if you devoured 10 corpses, you would lose 10 stacks of the buff. Now it will only drop 1 stack, so that way you have a bit more control of it. And then also the Command Skeletons, Dark Mending, and Land of the Dead, Land of Plenty no longer consume stacks or receive increased healing. That just used to be every time that it would do damage or trigger for Land of the Dead, it would consume stacks. So while they were active, you had no stacks of the Blood Cascade. So should be better to manage. That was my bigger issue when playing around with the Blood set, is that it was really hard to manage your stacks. You either just did not use healing skills and then your stacks got too high and you have to let it drop off, or you used some of the better healing skills like Devour, Cannibalize, and then it just would remove all of your stacks at once, and so you couldn't really build it up to the point that you needed to do increased damage. The Saint set, the Bone Armor set, has now been renamed Grace of Inarius. The 6-piece set bonus, they removed the tag of the Bone Tornado that spins around you. It no longer does physical damage. It just says damage, which I imagine its damage will reflect the rune of Bone Armor that you're using. So that way, if you're using a Poison rune, it will do poison damage. Cold rune, it will do cold damage. The Plague set now has been renamed the Pestilence Master's Shroud. 2-piece set bonus has been changed. It no longer fires a Corpse Lance, fires a Corpse Fragment, but it has had the damage buffed to 800% weapon damage. That is, of course, the Corpse Lance build that people were using with that set wouldn't make it to live in one shape or the other, mainly because it focused on Blood as Power. I'm sure it did hell to the surfers, and I can only picture 4 Necromancers running around on the screen, all using that at the same time. It would just be a nightmare, not only for lag, but for server stability. Yeah. I guess that's just one, have to wait and find out how it interacts with other items that might increase, like corpse damage. This one's, going back to it, it kind of lacks a little bit. There's some nice damage, nice items that will increase the damage of the Bone Spear, but it seems that consuming the corpses really is all just about giving you stacks of the buff that increase the damage of the Bone Spear, and doesn't have much other interaction. I would like to see on this one an actual damage bonus to your corpse skills themselves. So that way, if I use Corpse Explosion with this set, it's going to have a base increased damage, which then I can then use those other items that then buff Corpse Explosion to get the power. But, you know, as we go through and we testing, we see what its damage actually is like on the beta test realm, see how far it can push, then that information can then be taken by the developers, and they can, you know, tweak the numbers however they see fit. Whether they want to actually add a damage bonus to corpse skills to the set, or if they are just going to go through and, you know, hey, let's double or triple the damage bonus, you know, for the corpse explosion item or the corpse lance item or what have you, in order to make those more viable. There's a lot of different ways that they can go about buffing them. And then finally is the Jeroen arms. Yeah. Moving on. 2-piece set bonus, Army of the Dead gains the effect of the Unconventional Warfare rune. As with most 2-piece sets, this normally has something to do with like speed farming or movement. The 2-piece set bonus itself doesn't give you any effect, but the individual items like Danetta's Revenge could give you bonuses. And since I haven't found this on the beta, I don't know what items actually comprise it, or if there's any other abilities to it. But because it makes it so that way, like you could have multiple runes on your Army of the Dead, could be interesting for the pet set, which is has a lot of focus on Army of the Dead. Excuse me. And while not particularly, that does like wrap out all of the items that we have been added into the Necromancer that we see in the patch notes. For those that care, there are full flavor texts on all of these items now as well. We learned a little bit about some new Necromancers, as well as some old Necromancers that we knew before. There's some quotes from Mindolin, or there's also an item named after him. I think it was the Wisdom of Kalen, because as we found out in the book of I think it was the Book of Cain, not the Book of Tyrael, that it was revealed that the Book of Kalen is actually authored by Mindolin under a pen name. So there's a lot of other like little interesting like lore tidbits and stuff in there in the flavor text, and there's a lot of fun. I cannot wait to get more into the story and the lore and everything on those. It's gonna be fun. I can't wait. But that's not the limit of the changes, and this is going to be big for those that might struggle a little bit in your seasons because you don't like set dungeons. Now, whenever you enter into a set dungeon, all of the monsters' locations will appear on the minimap. So you no longer have to get down to the last few monsters to kill before they start appearing. So no more going through, clearing the entire rift, getting down to that point where I have 2 monsters remaining and then realize they were in a little nook or cranny all the way back at the beginning of the rift. And because of the travel time to get back there, you fail. And then also all basic tier monster kill requirements have been lowered. So now, not for the complete mastery of the dungeon, but just to say that you did it, the kill requirements have been lowered to make them a little bit easier, at least for getting the first couple of chapters done for your seasonal journey, which just requires you to complete the set dungeon. Mastering it still is a little bit easier, but now it should be really easy to just complete if you're only interested in getting the first 4 chapters done to get like the Hadrig's Gift, the base portrait, and whatever the new cosmetic item is for that particular season. So yay! Ease of access. That's gonna be probably a much overshadowed change in this particular patch, just because a lot of the focus is going to be talking about the Necromancer. I mean, I think I probably just spent about an hour talking about all those items, and then once Steven gets back on the show, we'll be talking even more about the Necromancer. That is huge. That one is big. They just made set dungeons a lot easier, especially for, like, oh my god, Unhallowed Essence would be such an easier set dungeon if you could just see where all the enemies spawned. Because the main reason why I fail Unhallowed Essence is because I run out of time hunting down that one frickin' spider that was just off in the little corner that I didn't see as I vaulted past. You know, it's like, this is going to be awesome. Can't wait. It's going to be great. Not so much related to this patch, but there was a new challenge rift that was added in this week, yesterday, that I'm really bad at playing a monk, but this was one of those builds where its survivability was a little bit wanting. Maybe I just don't know how to play the build, but it felt really squishy. Can't wait to hear Leviathan's feelings on this, namely because hopefully he'll get a chance to actually play it and test it out. I know there's a lot of people that have really, really been digging these challenge rifts, and I only hope that that continues and it will have more people actually going and participating and really digging into these challenge rifts and kind of creating, fostering that little bit of competitive community around these once they go live. I know I've talked a lot about these Necromancer changes, and that does pretty much wrap up everything that we got new in this patch. It's a little bit too early. It's only been a few hours to really make any calls or say this is going to be a great build. That was just kind of spitballing random theory crafts as I went through all of these items here tonight. We will probably have a lot more to work with by next episode and start sharing some Necromancer builds with everyone. Yeah. But we're just going to get in there, test some Necromancer, test some builds, and see what sticks, see what works. And now we'll just be going through, moving on to everyone's favorite part, the community section. We've got some emails to go through and check here. I know a lot of times I will tend to skip these on the solo episodes, but I just want to go through and make sure that we get some of these out of the way so we don't end up with a situation where we're reading emails from a month ago. Because we do really appreciate, you know, all the feedback in the letters that you guys send us. Letters, emails, yeah, digital letters. You know, we love interacting with our community. We love when you guys come and hang out with us in Twitch chat. I know I haven't really been paying too much attention to the Twitch chat. With a solo episode, it's a bit hard to split focus in between all of the notes and the everything going on in the chat itself, especially with people like Longshot and Shadow trolling every 5 seconds, because I'm sure that's what they're doing. I just have the assumption that that is the only thing that they're doing at the moment. But going and jumping into some of these emails here. Let's see. Our first email, this one comes in from Kurt. Sup, fellas? I've been a long-time listener. Episode 1, Rip Archon. He's still on the moon training penguins how to play Pokemon. He's doing fine. And I've also had the pleasure of being a member of the Blizz Pro clan for the last 5 seasons. I started as a softcore player initially, but the dark side was too much to resist, and I made the switch to hardcore. Life-changing. Just wanted to say what a fantastic job y'all are doing providing analysis, feedback, and information to the community on all things Diablo. Lastly, I also wanted to submit an item of the week, as both Leviathan and Nineball are avid demon hunters and would appreciate this. Keep up the good work. P.S. Dread Scythe, there's still time to make the switch. So, Rob, hardcore. Death is calling, man. Death is calling. Thank you very much, Kurt, for that email. Next, we're going on. Let's see. This one is from Cad. Trying to figure out the number there, and my brain isn't working. MCMXCAD CAD. Just wanted to go through and write, hello all. I've been following the streams, Leviathan, Nineball, in the workshop for a few months now. Really enjoying the content. I've been active in Diablo 3 since vanilla, but did not really get into the content until after Reaper. I mean, I was fun grinding for the really well-rolled yellow and trashing the legendaries that dropped every few days, but I took a pause while the game was polished and have fallen back in love since then. I've been active most seasons. Most recently, I decided to roll hardcore in Season 9 and 10 thanks to Leviathan. You, sir, are responsible for my elevated blood pressure, complete change in how I view playing the game, and that's pretty awesome. No one in my clan of 4 years. No one in my clan of 4 years is rolling hardcore, and this will be my choice of game type going forward. There's still no going back to softcore. I've met some great people there, and that will carry forward. I'd like to join a clan with some other players rolling hardcore for grouping and friendly banter. I'm hoping to be considered for the Blizz Pro clan when a spot opens up. Then goes through, there we go, Nigma Phoenix. Alright, that's a name that I'm familiar with. Nigma Phoenix goes through and is hanging out in both of Leviathans in my chat. I've seen him in the Westmarch every once in a while. I think he's actually here tonight, so hi. How you doing? And just goes through and gives us some information. And yeah, as soon as we go through and get some spots opened up, we'll definitely have a spot for you to go and welcome you into the clan. Which is one thing that I just wanted to touch on. I don't know if it's completely about just like the Necromancer, or if it's just like how awesome Season 10 has been. But the amount of dedication and the hype in Diablo this season has been at an all-time high. I really have not seen this many active players, I want to say, since I think it was Season 5 or Season 6 when they added in Hadrig's Gift, and you had a lot of people coming back for the first time and saw a huge spike in the number of people that were playing, and then also the length of time that people were playing. You know, Season 10 is the first time, I think in forever, that we're a month into the season and the Blizz Pro clan is still full. Like, we have no openings and no one anytime soon that's on the verge of being kicked out due to inactivity. So you know, for all of those that are waiting to go through and get into the clan, I'm you know, sorry that it has been a wait. We're just basically waiting to go through and have spots open up, but people are really active. People are really hyped about, you know, Diablo right now, and so they've been going through and grinding away at the seasons. This next email comes in from Dan. He just went through, and this is also more of a response to anyone that had any problems with episode 116. He did just write in to go through and say that there was some audio issues. Apparently there was a problem with the upload, and so it cut the 2-hour podcast down to a minute. But that has been corrected. So if you had issues with episode 116, it should be all taken care of. Just go ahead, delete whatever it is that you had downloaded prior, and try downloading the episode again, and you should be able to get the full episode to listen to. He also went through and added in, keep up the great podcasts. I look forward to each one. Thanks again. Dan, thank you for going through and writing in. And we did get all of that taken care of for you. Next email comes in from Oz. This one, he just wanted to go through and show off some awesome primals, which I'll be getting to soon in the items of the week. He did have quite a few to show off, but I picked just one to go through and include in tonight's items of the week. Our final email, before we get into those aforementioned items, this one comes in from Beastlord. He wanted to say, hello, my real name is Jacob. I'm 23 years old. I'm dyslexic, so sorry if there are any spelling or grammar errors. My gamer name is Beastlord, and the Twitch name is Beastlord Hunter. I come from Denmark, but have started playing North American hardcore and would like to play with you from the Westmarch Workshop. As you may have noticed in some of the strange times, that I'm in some strange times compared to you, because I'm from Denmark. It's also because I'm sick of whiplash and social phobia. I wanted to describe myself as a quiet and good person as well, as to help me, that he likes to help where he can help. I'm playing a lot at night, so thinking if that suits you guys well in the US. My time as a gamer, I've played far too much World of Warcraft over the last 10 years, but that stopped about half a year ago. I've played a little bit of Diablo 1 and a lot of Diablo 2, especially the Necromancer and the Druid. I've been playing Diablo 3 since the beta, but not so much of the live Diablo 3, because it was not equal to how the game was in the auction house idea. When the game, though, got to Reaper of Souls, he went through and restarted, and has taken more and more over the last half a year, and has come to the point where you started playing hardcore, just because he used to play hardcore in Diablo 2, and it's been super fun again. Looking forward to the Necromancer and getting super deep back into the game. Hope you can understand what I'm writing, and otherwise grab me and ask in. Well, thanks Beast Lord for going through in that email, and as I mentioned before, as soon as we go through and we have some spots open up, we would definitely love to go through and get you into the clan. Just have to go and wait through as we have some room in the clan to allow everyone to go through and jump in. But don't worry, we've got your email, and we will hold on into it and keep you in mind. And so with that, if you ever want to go through, send in a story or just ask to be included into the clan, all you have to do is just send us an email. It's westmarchworkshop@blizzpro.com. So, don't be scared to go through and share any stories that you might have or epic loots. And that email again is westmarchworkshop@blizzpro.com. And getting into it, we do also have our items of the week. If it will appear, there we go. Got that working there. So this first item, this one comes in from Diacor. It's a Primal Restraint that has been rolled for critical hit damage increased by 50%, critical hit chance increased by 6%, reduces the cooldown of all skills by 8%, with the secondary properties of 210 physical resistance, and reduces the duration of crowd control effects by 40%, and of course the socket on there. Truly an awesome restraint. Usable by a lot of classes at that, since you rolled the main stat off there. And it's just like, I wonder, when we go through and we have the primals, should I still read out all the numbers? Because we all know what they're going to be, because they're all maxed. I guess it makes my job a little bit easier in that. But I mean, just for old time's sake, and maybe it's a stat that you don't know what the max is, well, we're just going to go through and keep with tradition. And we're just going to read through all of them, because it just sounds impressive. Here, I have included a couple items from the same person. I know normally we only show one item per viewer, but these next couple come in from Mad Hamster. And he has been sending in these items over the past month, since we've been really backlogged and going through and getting to the items of the week. So I did want to include some of the items that he sent in, because he sent them in what would normally have been across multiple episodes, and so I do want to include them all. The first one here is a Primal Marauder's Visage that's rolled 1,000 Dexterity, 1,000 Vitality. Critical hit chance is increased by 6%. Secondary properties increase physical resistance by 210. Monster kills grant 250 XP into socket. His next item included is a pair of Primal Natalia's Bloody Footprints. These ones came with 650 Dexterity, 650 Vitality, 130% all resistance, move speed increased by 12%, 35% increase gold from monsters, and monsters grant 260% additional XP. Beautiful items. I mean, too bad it's Natalia's, but still very, very beautiful. And this next item is included from Coach, and I guess this is going to have to start a new tradition. We used to have the thing with the ancient furnaces. Now I guess it's going to have to continue on with primal furnaces. And this bad boy is clocking in at 4,196 DPS with 1,465 strength, increased attack speed by 7%, 36,000 life per hit, and the secondary property of 5.1% chance to fear on hit and increased damage from elites by 50. He's not re-rolled anything on this item or used a Happy Meal on there, but that could probably get to some disgusting numbers if you were to say re-roll the damage percentage on there. Not that many builds anymore use the furnace to actually be equipped. It's more often than not something that's included in the cube, but just still a beautiful, beautiful item. This next lovely collage, I'm not going to go through and get into their individual stats. This one comes from No One's Minion, who many of you might be familiar with from the BlizzPro clan or from Leviathan streams. Decided to go through and send in her collection of ancient Yang's recurves, which I think have actually increased since she went through and sent in this lovely display of just sheer RNG luck, I guess, would probably be the best way of putting it. But for those of you at home, you know, she's included 11 primal Yangs that she's accumulated over the season, and I believe this image was sent in about a month ago, if not a little bit. Actually, no, not a month ago. It was it? Yeah, this was a while ago. This was a couple of weeks ago. It was pretty early into the season. So, in order to go through and grab all of those is, well, it blows my mind, at least. Continuing on, this next item comes in from Lala. She sent it in with the tag, just so that way all the items of the week aren't ancient Yangs. She's included this Hellfire Amulet, where it's been re-rolled to have fire skills increase damage by 20%, and critical hit damage increased by 99%, critical hit chance increased by 10%, 159 physical resistance, the socket, of course, and then, of course, gains the Rampage passive, which this item itself is damn near a primal. Since, you know, being ancient wouldn't increase any of these stats, and the only way that a primal would have been made it better is slightly more physical resistance. It'd have 50 more physical resist, and 1% more critical hit damage on it. So that is almost a primal, non-ancient Hellfire Amulet that you went through and accumulated there, Lala. And as I mentioned earlier, we have another item sent in here from Oz. This is a Primal Cinder Coat that has the fire skills, deal 20% more damage, 650 increased dexterity, 650 vitality, has had a Candle Sun's augment with a level 70 gem to give 350 bonus dexterity, secondary resist of 210 lightning resistance, and reduces the resource cost of all skills by 30%. And, of course, triple socket on there. We haven't seen a Cinder Coat in quite some time, so it's a nice, beautiful item to go through and show off. And then, what is our final item of the week here? This one was sent in by Kurt. This is the item that he said that he wanted both Leviathan and I to see. It is a Primal Carly's Point. And this beautiful, beautiful specimen is clocking in at 3,083 DPS. Has rerolled for the 10% base weapon damage, 1,000 dexterity, increases attack speed by 7%, 11,000 life after each kill, Impale returns the full 15 hatred after hitting an enemy that's already been impaled, and a Happy Meal for a socket. That is just a thing of beauty. That I can't say anything else. That is... even the secondary property was like the right one. It was just perfect. I don't know how that could get any better. I don't think it can, to be honest. That's just perfection. Perfection in the form of a dagger. And that does bring us to a close for our community feedback section. And so if you would like to go through and have your email or your epic loot included, just send us an email, westmarchworkshop@blizzpro.com, so that way we can go through and include it here on the show. We love going through and interacting with our community, and we'd love to see more from you. So, you know, thank you very much for all of that. And before I go through and get to the outro, I did forget to go through and mention this at the beginning of the show. And please forgive me, but I do want to go through and give a big shout out to our sponsors, Intel, Lenovo Legion. Our banner down below does still say Legion by Lenovo, but they've changed their branding to be Lenovo Legion. So thank you very much. And of course, big thanks to BlizzPro.com for giving us this lovely platform to go through and talk about Diablo and have these wonderful little podcasts and interacting and seeing all the great things that the community has to offer. And I guess just for if you want to go through and catch more of the show, you can, of course, go through, follow us on Twitter. We are at the WM Workshop, so that way you can see tweets from us as well as information on when the show goes live. We do broadcast here on twitch.tv/BlizzPro every other Wednesday evening at 9 p.m. Pacific, or 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. Again, that was twitch.tv/BlizzPro. We are even in game. We are the BlizzPro clan. We are full up at the moment, but until then, you can always join the Westmarch Workshop community, so that way we can go still chat, interact, and try and find groups for people. You can also find a lot of the things that we talked about on tonight's show and more at diablo.blizzpro.com. You can always come in, chat, and hang out with us. Both Leviathan and I, while we've been streaming, have been hanging out on the BlizzPro Discord server, which you can find at discord.gg/BlizzPro. Don't be shy. Come and chat. We don't bite, unless you want us to. And, of course, if you want to go through and follow us individually, I am on Twitter at 9ballgamer, and you can go through and find my streams at twitch.tv/9ball. I've been making a commitment to go through and stream Sundays through Wednesdays. It is a bit late at night. I generally don't start until around 10:30 Eastern, but I do go until around 2 a.m. So if you ever want to come hang out and chat, don't always play Diablo. I do mix things up a little bit here and there, maybe playing a little bit of Heroes, a little bit of Dawn of War, but I will never shy away from discussing Diablo, no matter what it is that I am playing. And, of course, Sir not appearing in this episode, you can always find Leviathan. He is on Twitter at LeviathanD3, and you can find his stream at twitch.tv/Leviathan111, and his stream has been tearing things up, consistently one of the top Diablo streamers on Twitch. So if you're watching this or listening to this, you probably have already watched his stream. He is having some computer issues at the moment, but stay tuned. I'm sure he will be back up and running sometime in the near future in order to go through and get that back up. He generally tends to stream almost every day as he goes and finalizes a schedule that's going to work for him and real-life commitments. But yeah. With that, again, I just want to go through and say thank you to everyone that went through and came and hung out with me here tonight on the episode. Next episode, we should be back to our usual two-man crew with Leviathan. We hope to also go through and get Dread Scythe in on the action, depending upon what we have to go through and cover, to go and get maybe some insights from his massive spreadsheet about like the past seasonal info that he's gleaned. And with that, good night, everyone.